week's episode, you're going to find me talking to Angel Hill. She's a thyroid and a perimenopause expert. I was excited to talk to her simply because that's where I'm at in my life. And I was like, I know about this kind of stuff. I'm excited to see how well I've learned and researched. And I was taken aback by the amount of stuff that I misunderstood, didn't understand, or overcomplicated. So hopefully for you, Angel will make everything feel much more practical and doable like she did for me. Angel, how are you? It is lovely to be talking to you today. And we're going to talk about some juicy stuff that, oh my God, I have so many feelings, so many questions and so many thoughts about. And I'm excited to get stuck into this. So it's going to be about women's hormonal health and peri and menopause. Woohoo! Can you first tell me what inspired you to get focused on all of those things?
Well, first off, thank you so much, Jennifer, for having me. I really appreciate it. So I was where a lot of my clients are right now. I was a burned out teacher. I literally passed out in the classroom and just everything was wrong. When I went to the doctor, he told me I was insulin resistant. I would never be not insulin resistant. I was just going to become a diabetic. My adrenals were all messed up. Everything was messed up in me. And I got better without the doctor's help. And I decided that was going to be my mission, to help other women do that. And interestingly, almost immediately after I started in the brick and mortar clinic, like when people actually saw me face to face, every single day it was the same story over and over again. So I realized, yes, I was definitely where I needed to be. And that was about 15 years ago. So I've seen about 7,000 clients during that time frame. And every one of them, energy issues, insulin issues, thyroid issues, sex hormone issues, just all the same thing.
I have never felt more abandoned than when I hit perimenopause. And there's no other way of putting it. Like, as a woman, like, I'm 45, so I hit it a little bit earlier. I started probably about 37. I'm still in it. I feel like it's never going to end. But like with periods, I was told somewhat in advance what to expect, and anything I wasn't told by my mother, I was told by my friends. I don't feel like I missed a whole lot there. With pregnancy, same. With birth, with recovering after birth. And then it came to menopause. For starters, I didn't know there was a peri and a menopause, and I only through reading your posts and doing some research for this did I understand there was a difference. Okay, that's how naive. But I also
there's not enough education.
No, and even the list of symptoms doesn't, like, if you Google any list of symptoms, they generally don't cover all of the possible symptoms. There's things like every couple of weeks I go into my sister and I'm like, got a new symptom, want to hear this? I feel like she's about 6 months behind me. But so you say yourself that you came across the hormonal imbalances and you sorted out yourself as such. And what are the most kind of common hormonal imbalances that women are experiencing?
So it honestly, and I'm going to explain something real quick before I answer that question. Our hormones work on something called a hormone hierarchy. And what that means is the baseline hormones have to be balanced and the next one up has to be balanced before everything else can be. So our baseline hormone is cortisol. It's produced by our adrenals, which are on top of our kidneys, and they're basically our energy source. But what people don't know about the adrenals, what's kind of the hidden secret, is it also produces our sex hormones too. So intricately related to sex hormones. Yeah. But how people can know if their adrenals are out, and I see this constantly, is they're tired. They sleep all night and they're still exhausted, or they're like exhausted all day and then they can't sleep at night. That's another one, constant. And that is something that, honestly, that's the first thing you have to work on before anything else can be taken care of. And then once that's taken care of, you work on insulin, which a lot of people say, well, I'm not diabetic. But most doctors, at least in the States anyway, don't check fasting insulin. So you really don't know if you're insulin resistant. And that's basically that pre-diabetes standpoint where we can really make some changes to get things better. But insulin is also intimately connected to all that as well. So if our adrenals are off, our insulin will be off, and vice versa. They go back and forth. Wow. And that feeds into the thyroid, which is the third on the link. And I feel like the thyroid is kind of the crux of everything, because the adrenals and the insulin really factor into the thyroid, but the thyroid really factors into the sex hormones. And women, we have the short end of the stick when it comes to the thyroid, because the thyroid is very hormone sensitive. And men go through about 2 hormonal changes through their lifetime, and women on average go through 6. So this is where we got to get all this right. And I don't know about in Ireland, but in the United States, doctors do not check the thyroid like they should. They usually check like 1 or 2 components and that's it, and they never check antibodies. And so this is an area where I really feel like we can really work on to get things fixed up. And then typically that's the program I work on. And typically by the time we get to sex hormones, if adrenals and insulin and thyroid are fixed, the sex hormones are usually fixed by then. Occasionally we'll have to do little tweaks here and there, but that's really, so people are low energy. Do y'all use the term hangry?
Oh my gosh,
Hangry all the
yes, all the
time.
time.
So those are tired all the time, hangry, can't lose weight. Those are my big symptoms I see, because you asked about symptoms. And then finally, when it comes to periods, I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but pain or too long or too short of periods. So those are the major symptoms I see in infertility.
Of course. If you start with something that you said cortisone, are they the same thing?
A little bit different. Cortisol is actually the hormone that is made, that our adrenals make. Cortisone is what doctors give us to, like, if we're in pain or something, it helps.
All right.
So cortisol is actually, and cortisone, they actually temper down inflammation in our body. So we need it. We need it to help with that. Unfortunately, when we're stressed, we have a lot of inflammation. So our body's constantly pushing it out. And that's when it becomes a problem.
I was going to say, is that the one they're referred to as the stress hormone?
Absolutely. And it also lovingly gives us all this fat right in our belly area.
Like you can't win. I'm climbing up this mountain and rolling down like half of it and then climbing up again. And,
yes, absolutely.
But it makes sense. Like, I love that imagery. Like you say, that tiered imagery. It also makes it feel a little bit like I could tackle that because it's one piece at a time. Because going in and with just going, okay, perimenopause, it's a nightmare. We all have to suck it up and get on with it. It just feels like you couldn't not fix it. I mean, you're not going to reverse time, but you couldn't, like, where do you begin? Because everything hurts or doesn't work the same way it did, from cognitively to the feel of my skin to the sound of my voice. Like, everything is different, and it's very hard to kind of go, well, where do I start? I like that that tiered approach makes it so very doable.
Absolutely.
Cool. I like that. So when you are helping women then to make those changes, actually start with the cortisol side of it. Like, if you were, how would you begin to approach helping people make changes to work on, say, that one? I'm not going to ask for all your secrets today, but just
I know.
in bite-sized chunks. I think it makes it feel, I feel already kind of like, oh, okay, this doesn't look like such a big mountain. It now looks a little bit smaller. So let's say with starting there in the beginning, like, where would you begin with changes for people?
Yeah, I'll give you like a tip for each of the hormones that you can easily implement today if you want. But I always do tell people consistency is a big thing. And I'm going to talk about that a lot, I'm sure, today, because I talk about consistency all the time. So I say take one thing, work it into your life. A couple weeks later, you feel pretty good about it, then add another thing. That way, but when we're talking about adrenals, the first thing you could do for the adrenals, and I recommend everybody do this, is to find an electrolyte that you like and take it every morning. So electrolytes are our 4 base minerals. It's calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. And our adrenals need sodium more than any other organ in the body, and they need it first thing in the morning. So you're giving your adrenals that sodium that it needs, but you also want to give it those other minerals, because minerals work in synergy. They work together. So if you just give one mineral, your body kind of gets out of balance. So if you get them all together, everywhere in the world, unfortunately, we have lost our minerals in our food. So we are farming out minerals out of the soil. So nobody's getting minerals. That's really a big reason why you want to do these minerals first thing in the morning. And minerals actually spark plug our hormones. So we can't have hormones if we don't have minerals. So that's another good reason. We're getting our adrenals going in the morning. We're also sparking our hormones. For insulin, my number one thing I recommend people do, and I say this all the time, if I had a magic wand, everyone would eat protein for their first meal of the day, and preferably every meal of the day. So I'm talking about 15 to 30 grams. Is that how do you?
Yeah.
Okay, grams. Okay. Protein. So like in the morning, I have at least 3 eggs. That's 18 grams of protein. And then I usually add things on top of that as well.
Yeah.
But by giving our body protein, they call it the protein hypothesis. And what happens is the more protein we get in our body, the less we want sugar and carbs, because our body really can't handle those. It can handle the protein, and it balances our blood sugar for the day. So we don't have those pops. And something that's not hormonal related, but we're all concerned about, I'm sure, is brain health.
Oh my
And
God,
what has
yes.
been discovered, if you Google type 3 diabetes, it's actually Alzheimer's. And what they've discovered is we've got these insulin receptors on our brain. And every time we get an insulin boost, so every time we're taking sugar in, it's
Mm.
causing those problem in our brain with brain fog and things like that. And we may not be diabetic ourselves, but it's causing our brain to be diabetic. So it's really
Oh my God, I
interesting.
felt that one directly. You know, when you're like, it's usually at certain times of the month where I'm like, I just, as I would put it, horsing sugar into me because it's just the craving and feeling sorry for myself. I've gotten better at it now. I used to, but I would notice that by the next day. The next day I might as well write it off because the whole next day I'm just like, and I
Yeah.
can't. It's not even a sugar crash. I just literally feel like somebody is just like running wire wool through my brain. I can't concentrate on anything. I can't think. Nothing is going to work. No amount of caffeine is going to fix it. And it's always, I always go, I can't do that. Now I just go, like, I cannot eat this much sugar. I need to do stuff tomorrow. So
Yes.
it's, it's
I
just,
know.
I assumed it was an age thing, but what you're saying there makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then on the thyroid end, that is really where I recommend testing. And that's where we go through all the thyroid, complete thyroid testing. And if somebody's listening, feel free to get in contact with me and I can give you a list of all this. But basically, I like to test all the thyroid plus the antibodies because about 60% of all over the world, women are walking around with subclinical hypothyroidism and don't know it. So what that means is that when they go to the doctor says you're not in a disease state, so you're fine, but their thyroid is not working properly and it's going to
Mm.
get in a disease state. So we want to stop that. So about 60% of women have that, don't even know it. And then of those 60%, 90% of them have an antibody. That means they have a thyroid autoimmune issue. So
Really?
it's really, yeah. And once you have one autoimmune issue, you're more likely to get others. So if we can catch this early on, we can really work on some things to help. But it all starts with that testing and having somebody that actually knows what they're looking for, look at it. So
Because I
that's
wondered
really
when
my
you said earlier, you're like, you know, if they do the thyroid test and they don't do the antibody one, I was like, I think I had my thyroid tested after a pregnancy, could be 20 years ago now. And I was thinking, did they do antibody? Does antibody test with that? So I didn't even
probably
know that
not.
that was a thing. Like, and do you know what I've also heard, or at least my husband was diagnosed with a B12 deficiency. He won't mind me saying that. It's a couple of months ago. But when he spoke to the doctor who had done the test on it, they said that they're finding more and more people turning up with autoimmune problems now as a result. Like it's a post-COVID thing that in the case of B12, it takes so long for your body to use up all of the stores that it has that it takes about 2 years from when it was nearly 2 years to the month that he had caught it before those stores had run out, and he got to the point at which the blood test told him that that's what it was. But they're, you know, there's, at least over here anyway, they're talking a bit about seeing more autoimmune diseases kind of come into the fore that have been triggered by having caught COVID back in the beginning of it as such from there. Now I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know whether that was the case or not. But I always assume that these things are age, that people around me seem to be having more things or finding more things, and I'm like, is this because we're older? And in my brain I'm going, I'm not that old, you know. But definitely maybe they're just finding out, like with a lot of other things, people are more likely to seek second opinions or seek answers now than they would have done 20, 40 years ago. Like, you know, you wouldn't challenge your GP here, definitely not 40 years ago, possibly not 20 years ago. Whereas now, even my own GP has said himself, he's like, I think we're becoming more kind of a coughs and colds and sniffs and sprained ankles. He said we get more and more people coming in looking for referrals to specialists here. And that's what they're finding themselves doing more and more, or going into specialisms themselves, which he has, and his wife is a GP has as well, who is actually a specialist in women's health.
Oh, awesome. We see that in the States as well. And unfortunately, here, everybody's gotten so compartmentalized that they can't look at the whole picture. And that's where, like, then people come to people like me, traditional
Yeah.
naturopaths, to kind of bring it all together for them.
Yeah, because as you're talking there, I'm like, oh, I saw a thyroid specialist years ago. Oh, I've had the diabetes test. I was, this is not about me, but, you know, I had maternity diabetes, gestational diabetes, I suppose, you know, all these different things, but none of them did I see the same person for them, nor would anyone have known about the other for any reason, unless I brought it up. So you're right. I think that holistic approach, you know, one, like, as we've just learned, one can trigger the next from there. So
Absolutely.
it may have been a root cause somewhere. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
my mind is blown already and we've only gotten started. So if a lot of women, of course, that are hitting that stage of perimenopause and menopause are typically, established in their workplaces. Many of them could be mothers or parts of families. They've got busy lives as a general rule, even if they don't. They now then have to make some changes. And like you talked about those changes, they're really, really doable. Is it possible to address all of these things with really doable changes, or is there anything that you have to slow down and stop and address that's going to mean a lifestyle change, a big lifestyle change?
Usually the biggest one of my clients is stress. Figuring out how to slow down enough to get their stress down is really the big one. And I gear my programs to busy women. So we do a lot of texting, things like that, because a lot of programs, they want to spend 2 hours with you a week on the phone and talking and stuff. And the people I deal with don't have time for that. But the big issue they have is they're so stressed because they're doing so much. So that's where I really see stress come in. And that's a hard one for me. I really struggle with that as well. So I'm constantly trying to come up with resources and things to help them. And but it all comes down to us saying we're worth it. We're worth giving ourselves some time to sit down and meditate or whatever it is you want to do to take a little bit of that stress off.
And this isn't on my question list, but just out of curiosity, do you find any difference in people suffering from these symptoms that are also neurodivergent, or do they suffer the same way? Just curious.
You know what? It's different, all different ways. Cause some people, it's really, that's a really great question. So I find people who are not neurodivergent tell me that they think they're becoming neurodivergent because of perimenopause. Like so they'll say, I didn't have problems with ADD before, but suddenly I can't focus. So I actually have that more than I have it the other way around.
Oh my God, that makes perfect sense. Like, cause I know for me, I would have had ADHD obviously all of my life. But I was coping with it, just about barely coping with it. And then perimenopause hit and I just could not cope with all the symptoms anymore, because when you add on top of it brain fog, and you add on top of it hot flashes, and you add on top of all the other joyous things that come with perimenopause, I just couldn't manage both things. I hadn't the additional mental energy to manage the perimenopause stuff, or I was managing that and I didn't have the mental energy to manage the ADHD stuff. So sought the diagnosis and found out and managed both of them somehow. May it long last. Now, but I was just curious. I wondered exactly that, because for me, it was the trigger to everything kind of imploding in that sense and having to seek help in both cases. So yeah, curious. So when it comes, let's go back a little bit in the life of a woman, I guess, as such. When we start with periods, I know that, like, even within my family, I'm one of 4 girls. I'm one of 6 children altogether, but one of 4 girls. And we were all 4 of us, very, very different when it came to the kind of periods that we had. Like, I had a sister who used to miss 1 to 2 days every single month from school and from work, vomiting and buckled over a toilet, and was always told, like, well, it's just periods, it's just how they are. Whereas I never had any hassle with them at all. But it changed after every baby, for sure. Some in a good way and some not so good. And that same sister is 43 now, and finally she's getting, her periods are starting to get further apart, but she's still buckled for a day to 2 days with migraine, not vomiting anymore, but has suffered her entire life. But we've only heard now that that's not normal. So when it comes to periods, what should women be paying attention to that might actually indicate that there's something else amiss?
Yeah, so what she went through, definitely not normal. That should not be happening. Some other things, if your cycle lasts longer than 35 days or is shorter than 21, that is definitely a sign. Any kind of pain, like what your sister was going through, yeah, definitely not an issue. The other issue I have a lot of people ask about is clotting. Now, if it happens for one period, I'm like, let's just watch it. But if it happens more than one period, we definitely check into that as well. And this is the kind of things where if there's some major pain going on, that's where we really kind of have to say, okay, we're definitely implementing the lifestyle and diet situations, but we may have to supplement at some point there just to get you where you need to be. Now, our body works in 3-month cycles, kind of like the seasons.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so almost always within 3 months, within 3 months, we can actually actually get that period back where it needs to be and things flowing again. And then we can work on the diet lifestyle to keep it that way. But
Cool.
yeah, when it gets that bad, sometimes we really do have to supplement.
Yeah. And you can write it in 3 months, which seems, I feel like I almost shouldn't tell my sister because she's managed to but what I like to see is that there's a lot more women talking now about what's normal and what's not, and their experiences going to doctors and being told, it's just periods, or it's just this, or it's just that, and pushing back for these things and discovering, other things. Like I know, at least here anyway, only up until, might have even been this year, if you ask for it, you can have pain relief when you're getting like an IUD fitted. But you weren't even offered it prior to this year, like, because it doesn't have any pain receptors.
It's medical stuff has been geared towards men for so many years. They're just now starting to do anything with women, so they don't. It's just so ridiculous.
It is, isn't it? It's insane. Like, and I love that it's coming in now like a wave. This is not a gentle change of things. It is coming in like an absolute tidal wave. Everyone is, changing their mind and getting behind it. And to be fair, some social medias like, TikTok and Instagram, I'm sure there's a lot of misinformation on those things too. But even if it makes a woman question whether she needs a second opinion or whether what she's feeling is normal or not, and makes her look for a second opinion, I think there's a win to be had there in that case, for sure.
I think if men missed a day or two of work every month because something happened, we would be all over that. So, it's time. It's time.
Absolutely. I love those. My favorite videos to watch are the ones with the period simulators, that they put on the guys and then they'll put it on their partners at the same time. And so that they can qualify actually being at level 1, 5, 10, whichever it is. And the poor guys are like, what? You just get so used to dealing with pains and discomforts all the time that, it doesn't occur to us to ask the questions, or in many cases, sadly, that women won't ask the questions because nothing will be done about it, even if they do. So that tidal wave, I'm welcoming it, even though I hopefully will be through to the menopause by then. But for those coming behind, when you're working with your plans, then working with your clients and you're customizing your plans, what kind of assessments are happening, or what do you suggest that they do that plays a part in this process?
Okay. So I like to do 3 different things. First off, you got to always talk to people. So we're talking, either texting or talking, but we're figuring out what exactly the symptoms are right now. But I have 2 different types of assessments, functional assessments, that I like to do. And one of them is called hair tissue mineral analysis. It's actually used by our, a federal government here. When they go in and they look at sites and stuff to see if there's any heavy metals or toxins or anything, they'll actually use this. And what's cool about the hair tissue mineral analysis is it not only tells you where your minerals are in your body, but also if you have any heavy metals hanging out, and it's for the last 3 months. So it's not like with blood work, which is right that point. You're really finding out what's happening with that. And so I mentioned earlier how I love electrolytes because they help us get minerals. So this really even personalizes what minerals you need, what minerals you have too many of, so we can make sure your minerals are balanced for that hormone. And then your listeners may not know this, but heavy metals actually will get into the receptors of hormones and cause all kinds of problems. So that's why you don't want heavy metals in your body. They literally pretend to be hormones and they do things they're not supposed to. So we want to get rid of those.
Where would you get heavy metals from to get them in your system?
Okay, so and if you drink out of soda cans, you can have a lot too much aluminum. People who are over 40, at least in the States, we use mercury in fillings, so mercury fillings. People who are welders, so we have a lot of welders in this country, and they get a lot of heavy metals into their system. So it can come from a lot of different ways.
Oh, wow. Because I mean, I've heard of like lead poisoning, I presume, and that's the only time I've ever heard of it, because a lot of houses in Ireland, of course, are well old. My house is here since like 1858 or something.
Yeah.
So they'll do checks on like if you're decorating to make sure there's no lead paint underneath all of the layers and such that are here. That's a thing that we hear about even now still. But outside of that, I didn't even realize that you could get it in other ways. Like, I wonder, do I leave the house at all or learn anything? I thought I knew stuff, but I'm apparently not. But when you talked earlier about things like we were talking about stress and cortisol and all that. So if stress triggers the problems at the cortisol level, then can that also impact things beyond menopause, like periods and stuff then too?
Absolutely, because that sense stress comes from the adrenals, and the adrenals produce cortisol, and that is that bottom layer of the hormone hierarchy. It affects everything above it. So stress is in every layer of our hormones. And people probably can tell this. A lot of women, if they're stressed, they won't get their period.
Yeah,
So, and you'll go, oh, I didn't. And we say these things, oh, we didn't get our period because we were stressed. So you definitely know it. It's just one of those things we really don't think about how much it really affects everything.
and it is everything. Like, so in the same way as taking the electrolytes, doing something to address the stress, whether it's walking or running or yoga or whatever helps you relax. I play games on my phone, and maybe that's not the best way of doing it, but I find mentally I just go, oh, as soon as
Oh,
I do
yeah.
it, works for me.
And it's also good for autoimmune because conventional doctors and doctors like me actually agree that stress is what triggers autoimmune issues. So anytime you can get stressed down, it's so many levels there. And
Yeah.
I have an aura ring and it tells you like where you are in your stress. And you say playing on your phone, like when I'm watching a TV show, particularly if it's like a kind of fun TV show, my stress on my aura just goes crazy down. So find things that make your stress go down no matter what
Oh,
it
I like
is. It
that.
helps. Yeah.
I've heard about the rings, but I hadn't actually seen them in action. And I love nothing more than a technical like way of showing me what's improving. I used to have like I have the smartwatch, and I had an app on it that used to tell me. It was really funny. I used to track how my sync, they would call it, basically between kind of like your heart rate and your brain activity or whatever. It was how synchronized you were with regard to your activities. And then I used to laugh at when I took my medication for ADHD, the sync would go perfect. And when it had worn off or before I took it, it was like, there were
I
wild
believe
parts.
that.
And it was a tablet. So I'm like, it doesn't know that I've taken the tablet. So there must be some significance to what's happening, even heart rate wise and such. I just thought I'm fascinated. So that aura ring sounds really interesting then as well. If you can visually see that you're making a difference, then you can see the benefits of the work that you're doing. I love that. Love that. So for women like me that are like we're approaching or going through the menopause, then what are some of the misconceptions? I feel like there's so many of them that need to be debunked as far as you're concerned.
I think the biggest one is that you can keep doing the same thing and get the same results. That's like the number one thing.
Mm.
People come in, I've always exercised, I've always done this, I've always done that, and nothing's happening. And I'm like, that's because things have changed in your body. So now we have to relook at everything. And two of the biggest things that people cannot grasp that really make a difference, and if they do it, it really changes things, is a lot of times they're not eating enough. And I know that sounds really strange, but when you get the hair tissue mineral analysis done, it can tell that you're not eating enough. And when I tell people that, I have this one lady who she's like probably 58 years old. She paid attention to me when I told her that. And she had been trying to lose weight for 2 years. Within 2 weeks, she started to lose weight. When I talked to her about 3 months ago, she had lost all her weight. It was just because she started eating more.
What a great solution to that.
Yeah.
I
So
think
like
we're more
things like
susceptible
that.
though, aren't we? As women, as
Yeah.
a rule, like even over all of the years, that's what we've been taught, not to eat more, to eat less if you want to lose weight. And your body's, I always laugh that I'm from famine Ireland. My body goes, oh no, we're starving again. Let's hold on to all of that fat.
Absolutely. Yeah,
um,
it's just you've got to change some things, you can't. And
yeah.
the other thing is exercising too much. I really have people have to pull on that back on that a lot because they're stressing their adrenals out. Because if you exercise too much, your adrenals get stressed out as well.
Oh wow, didn't realize that either.
Yeah.
So then, if people making change like that, their lifestyle changes again then too. So you've talked about the like dietary changes and the minerals and such that you need, and then even that exercise can affect it then too. So things, I feel like it's a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So the sleep side of it as well, like that's going to impact it too. Would that be fair?
Yes, and new research is really cool on sleep. What they've discovered is it's not only if we're sleeping, but it's when we're sleeping and doing that consistently. So I'll give you an example. Say they pretty much everybody needs to be in bed by 10 o'clock. That's kind of the thing. We've definitely learned that from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. is when our body is doing all its cleaning and getting ready. So nothing's getting done. If you're not in bed by 10 o'clock, nothing's getting cleaned out. But the other thing they found is, say you go to bed at 8 one night and 9 one night and then 10 the next night, and then you're back to 9 and then you're back to 8. That skipping around is really hurting your circadian rhythm. And that takes care of everything, as far as sleep's concerned. So they say if you can keep that consistent every night, whatever time you decide to go, as long as it's before 10 o'clock, really makes more of a difference than how long you sleep. So
that's really
consistency. Yeah.
I live in a house full of people that have the most irregular and weird, like I'm probably the most consistent with bedtime, and I would have thought I wouldn't have been, but even I live with a load of boys, but yeah, most of them stay up significantly later than me, and even the youngest one will struggle to try and get him to bed at that time. But yet he'll sleep. Once you get him to bed, he's like, poof, out, just fighting the idea of going to bed. And the consistency you're talking about, even just this changing night after night after night, I wouldn't have even thought for a minute that would make that much of a difference. So it does.
Yeah, it really does, because our circadian rhythm really needs consistency to work well. And so that's what they're discovering. It's really an interesting new research.
Cool. So then for anyone then who is, I know my feeling when I found out that I was perimenopausal was I was just overwhelmed, I'd say would be the feeling for it. And if there's women out there then that are feeling like I was, I guess, overwhelmed and trying to figure out how to manage it, or what to do best for themselves, their own health as such, other than the dietary tips as such, what would you suggest that they could start with? Should they go straight for a program like yours? Should they read up on it more? What do you think?
So I would find somebody that you feel comfortable with watching on social media, see what their basic tips are, like I was talking about today, and implement those. And if you're implementing things that you think should be working and they're not, then that's when you really need to ask for help. And from somebody like me, just because we can kind of put all the pieces together for you. But definitely you have to ask for help. When my, plumbing goes bad, I call the plumber.
Fair, yeah.
And I spend all my life researching this. This is what I do, so you want to get somebody who knows what they're doing.
And you talked about that it can take 3 months to sort out periods. So if you were implementing a change, would it be fair to say if you're not seeing any results within 3 months of a change, not 40 different changes in that month, but a change, then that would be a good indicator that maybe you should look at something different or talk to somebody? Would that be a good way of judging it?
Absolutely. And what I tell people is, typically for me, I get people energy back in about a week. And then I say, give me 3 months and we can have pretty much stabilized everything that's going on in your body, because I work with everything besides hormones. But then I say it really takes 6 months to totally change diet and lifestyle changes. You know what I mean? So by the end of 6 months, you're good.
Oh my gosh, after all the years of struggling and trying to figure it out, that there's relief, because it feels totally doable.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Angel. So much information, all jam-packed in there. I'm going to be looking at the transcript so I can start making notes to myself.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having me on.
You're a superstar.